Hmm? It's fine. It's like those turtles. That's my favorite part so far. Hmm? Hmm? Let me see here. I see my phone real quick. 3:19.
I know. So what happened is the live stream?
I'm not sure. It's just making me anxious more. Is it my phone?
You're looking at
Oh, from the yeah.
You seen Godfather?
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
No,
Have I seen the most popular movie?
yeah, I know. I haven't seen it from start to finish, so I thought about watching it sometime soon.
Yeah, I might rewatch it because it's been a while, but I'm not sure what kind of appeal the movie would have for me.
Yeah, I'll pay closer attention to it.
You're so cute. You're looking not supposed to be me. No. Malika didn't do it. They don't identify as a guy. Part. Non-binary. Hmm? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. Hello, my name is Elias Martinez, and welcome to South Asia Deconstructed, a speaker series hosted by the Indigo Collective. First, I'd like to say that this event is in no way officially sponsored by the University of Texas at Austin. The views and opinions expressed here are that of our guest speaker and a student group, and not the official beliefs of the administration. I'd like to thank our sponsors first for the College of Liberal Arts, the Center of Asian American Studies, the South Asia Institute, LGBTQ Studies, the Department of History, the Liberal Arts Honors Program, the Plan 2 Honors Program, and from the Moody College of Communications, the Center for Entertainment and Media Industries, Communication Studies from the Texas McCombs Business School, the Harkley Institute for Entrepreneurial Studies, and finally, the UT Student Coalition for Caste Abolition. For some housekeeping things, this stream is currently being streamed live to the Indigo Collective YouTube channel in accordance with university policy. If for whatever reason you need to leave, please do so through the exit on our right, or there's an exit in the back. Make sure that your phones are on silent, and when you leave, make sure that you don't trip over the cord that's there. And without further ado, please welcome Manu Kaur, our guest speaker.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Does this work? Okay. Thanks for giving me your Saturday today. It's Saturday, so thank you for showing up. And anyone who's online, hi. So yeah, thank you again for the introduction. My name is Manu. Pronouns are they, them. I helped create an art exhibition and dance party called Dalit Dreamlands, which basically was to create a very queer anti-caste space, which has been missing in the diaspora for a long time. And so my PowerPoint is really going to be about talking about myself, my experiences with casteism, kind of a little bit about my background, and then going into like, what is Dalit Dreamlands? How was it created? What did it look like? And where is it going to go next? So yeah. Okay, so the art here is created. It was created by Parth. Their Instagram is Art Wallaho, and they hire them, please hire Dalit artists. They're a great graphic designer and artist. And so all of the illustrations you see here were used in our original Dalit Dreamlands, like for publicity and things like that. First, I just wanted to go through some kind of like guidelines, basically. Today's like anti-caste lens can be applied across like all fields and all the different variables. I will be talking about it in the context of art, but it can also be applied across, like education, culture, all of that. And then I also just wanted to say that, I'm not a spokesperson or anything. I think that it's common that when you have like Dalit feminists, like people put them on like a pedestal. And I just want to remind you not to do that. I'm not correct in everything. I will make mistakes. I'm not perfect. Things I say today, other people might not agree with, or I might make a mistake. I just want to remind y'all that, folks who do this work are humans. And it's just a reminder because I've seen like in activist circles how people kind of put people on pedestals. And the thing about that is as soon as they make a mistake, people take them off. And so there's just a reminder of that. And then also, I identify as Dalit the caste that I come from specifically is called Chamar. That is used as a slur against Dalit people. So if you're not from the Chamar caste, please don't say the word. But that's just kind of to give you a little bit specifics of where my caste location is. And then I also want to say that not every person who's caste oppressed identifies as Dalit. Some people actually find the term very problematic. They might identify as Ambedkarites, just caste oppressed, or they might actually use their actual caste name like Chamar. Just want to say that there's no right or wrong way to identify. Don't tell caste oppressed people how to identify. I do think that Dalit is a very academically used term, and so it doesn't resonate, and it's not easily accessible to all caste oppressed people. So just want to keep that in mind. And then basically there's no one face for who gets to talk about anti-caste politics. I'm just sharing my knowledge, but I don't have like degrees in this. Not that you need to have a degree to talk about these things, but just I'm basically just giving all these disclaimers so nobody comes at me. Okay, you can go ahead. Okay, so this is actually a screenshot I took from google.com. It says, what is caste? And it identifies it as caste is each of the hereditary classes of Hindu society, distinguished by relative degrees of purity or pollution. And so that's what Google says. I do want to add that although like caste itself originated in Hinduism, Hinduism is not the only religion that you see caste in. Caste has also permeated other religions, such as Sikhi. It's Sikhi, by the way, not Sikhism. And Islam and Buddhism too. And so I come from a Sikhi background. I'm Punjabi. And so a lot of my experiences with caste come from someone who comes from Sikhi background. And then this is basically it's like a pyramid of how caste works. I got it from Equality Labs. They are a nonprofit Dalit feminist-led organization that I've done some work with. It just kind of shows like the subdivisions of caste. And so technically there's 4. So it starts with the Sudras and then it goes up and then the Brahmins are at the top. And then basically people who are Dalit or also are indigenous, known as Adivasis, like are not even considered part of this triangle. They're actually considered even outside of that. And so that's kind of like to give you an illustration of how the caste subtopics work. So yeah, as I was saying, caste permeates every aspect of life. Quite literally, some people like to argue that, well, caste is class. It's not. It's beyond that. Caste dictates where you can work, what education you have access to, where you're allowed to pray, who you date, what events you go to, family politics, things like that. Caste permeates basically everything. An example of how it permeates culture. I found these slides. They were from Project Mukti. That's their Instagram, but they basically discussed Diwali. I'm sure many of you have heard of Diwali. It's a pretty popular, huge Hindu festival. As someone who's Punjabi and Sikh, my family, we also celebrated Diwali. But that was also because it's another Sikhi holiday as well. But basically, Diwali is a very casteist holiday that I encourage you all to like look up the details of it. It's argued a lot based on like who you ask, but basically the undertones of it, as most like Hindu casteist holidays, is that it's like caste privilege, light-skinned people defeating like the caste oppressed dark-skinned people. And so the slides basically talk about like, okay, why is Diwali problematic and what can we do about it? And I think what I really liked about these slides was that it's not just saying stop celebrating Diwali and call everyone out. Everyone who celebrates is awful, which is kind of like a praxis that I feel like I especially also kind of abided by. Like, oh, if you celebrate Diwali, you're casteist. And through my own learning, I'm realizing that it doesn't have to be so black and white. Things often are never black and white. And so the slides basically discuss like, okay, so Diwali is also very cultural, right? Most people, if you ask them what where does it even come from, they wouldn't be able to tell you. Most of them, they just have like fond memories of like going to their temple or lighting things, and like it's like festival of lights is how most people see it as. And so it's very cultural. Like I grew up going with my grandparents to the Gurdwara and like lighting diyas, and it was like a very fun holiday. And then as I grew up, like finding out the violent historical context of it, like how do you, if that's like something that's so deeply connected to your culture, are you just supposed to stop? Are you just supposed to like completely let go of it? Everyone's allowed to do what they want, but I think it's important to like, you don't have to let go of the cultural part of it, but you can transform it. Like instead of just saying happy Diwali, you can literally like have a workshop around it where you still get to do things that you feel honor the cultural aspects of it, but have a discussion about it. Where does Diwali come from? Why is it problematic? And like I think a lot of the times things like Diwali are used to like build community and like bond with other people. And so Project Mukti basically asks like, what are other ways that we could build community and we can still, you know, have it be like solidarity and have it be about like, you know, partying or whatever it is, but how do we do it through an anti-caste lens? And so I really like the different examples that they give. You can go on the next slide. Yeah. And so they talk about like to celebrate or not to celebrate, and how you can have an anti-caste praxis during festivals. I really enjoy this because it's not shaming anyone, but it's also like asking like people like, why don't we ask more questions of things that we just have been presented by our cultures? Like, where do they come from? What is the context? What's like the story? And so I feel like this is a very compassionate way of going about it, which I appreciate. And talking about festivals, so first of all, you know, we're on stolen indigenous land, but I'm in so-called Austin, Texas. We are at the university here, and I was given a lovely tour by Vishal. And as we were like walking around, we just noticed a lot of people wearing like white and just like going somewhere, and I'm like, what is happening? Is something happening? And then we've come to find that it's holy. Like they're having holy on campus. It's just so interesting. To like basically Holi is kind of like I see it as Diwali. You know, the historical context is Holi is a casteist holiday. Its roots are very casteist, celebrating the death of a caste oppressed woman. And also, you know, a lot of the ways that Holi is celebrated now, especially in India, but even here, you know, there's a lot of sexual violence, a lot of like basically just no respect towards women. It can be very violent as well. But most people know Holi as like wearing white and throwing color on each other. That sounds pretty fun, right? That's like, yeah, you just literally get to go out with your friends and like run around and dance and have fun. Um, and so it's just interesting that so many people are going to that, but many of them could probably not even tell you what is holy. In fact, like I think it'd be so interesting if someone just like went there and started interviewing people and like asking them like, what is the holiday here? Does it come from? I guarantee many of them won't know. They just know it's something that they grew up doing. And so I think it's just another example of like, how do you apply anti-caste lens to that? Like, it's important to have those kind of discussions and like being mindful, especially when it comes to South Asian festivals and cultures. It's important to kind of question the stories. And, you know, I guarantee most of the people who are going to this are caste privileged, you know, caste belong to dominant caste groups. And so many of them have the privilege to not even like need to care or question. And I think in order to be like to genuinely embody an anti-caste praxis, it's important to ask these questions. It's important to call in your friends. If someone's asking, are you going to this? Like, let them know, like, oh, okay, like, did you know? And then like, you know, some might be like, okay, yeah, I'm still going. And that's fine, but you can still plant that seed. But I do think it's important to kind of acknowledge that. It's really interesting that the day that I'm here to present about anti-casteism is the day that we see this very casteist holiday that everyone's going to. I just kind of think that's hilarious, honestly. But it's also very telling because obviously it's not just caste dominant South Asian people that are going to this event. It's like folks of all, you know, backgrounds, and it's being presented as something that's super fun and historical and cultural. And so I just want to give examples of all these insidious ways that casteism like infiltrates our spaces, quite literally right outside. So it's just a reminder of how caste permeates all aspects of life. And then, so basically, through that, I really like the term castrator. It sounds very evil in like a powerful way. But in order to be a castrator, we're asking for folks who have privilege to use their privilege. And these slides, like saw this years ago, and I feel like it's still very applicable even now. So like folks who want to know, like, well, how can I show up as I don't like ally, I prefer castrator. So some things you could do is speak out against casteism in your family, among your friends and colleagues, especially if you don't have like a South Asian background. I know it can be tricky because it's also like, well, are you stepping on toes? Like, do you have a right to say something if you're not part of like the South Asian culture? The answer is yeah. As you learn about it, you'll realize like most of South Asian people are caste privileged. I'm not asking you to just assume that everyone is, but a lot of times, especially folks who have power, who have wealth, are caste privileged, and a lot of them don't ask these questions again because of that privilege. And so to be a castrator is to educate yourself and then have those conversations, challenge your friends, challenge your professors. I think that's one of the most powerful ways to really address caste-based issues, especially in academia. Listen actively to Dalit feminists. I don't know if y'all are listening actively, but I know you're listening, so you're already being a castrator. But honestly, yeah, like there are so many amazing Dalit feminists, queer, trans Dalit folks who are, some of them, especially folks in India, are like quite literally risking their lives to speak out about this and to organize. And so I encourage y'all to find folks to follow, to listen to. Again, don't put them on a platform, but like if you're really committed to this knowledge, like build that platform and expand that knowledge by listening to different types of Dalit feminists, because not everyone agrees on the same practices. And then amplify Dalit voices, especially those that have informed or inspired you. I do think that it's important to pass the mic and let folks kind of do the talking. And so I do appreciate Indigo Collective for also doing that. These are just some of the ways that I found helpful. Okay, so my story. So basically, I was born in Punjab. I came here when I was 5 or 6. And so, my parents, basically, my dad, he was able to get an education in India. There's this thing called a reservation system, which is kind of like affirmative action here, where the government will give some slots to caste oppressed people so that they could attend, like have access to an education and attend school, because many times they're excluded, and they also can't afford it. There's just so many barriers. And so this reservation system was created to make sure that there's a seat. And so my dad was able to get through college and all of that through the reservation system. And then he was able to come here through his education. So, he was basically exceptional in order to have access to this, in order to even come to this country, this mess of a country, whatever. You have to be exceptional if you're like Dalit. Like you have to have like the best grades and all these things. And that in itself is a barrier, right? Like, why do Dalit people have to be exceptional and amazing in order to have access to education? But yeah, on the picture on the left, it's me, my mom, and my sister. And we're all organizing. It was a bill. It's called SB 403. This was basically a bill introduced to add caste to the anti-discrimination policy in California specifically. And we got pretty far. We got to the Senate level, and then we're waiting for the governor to sign it, and he didn't sign it. And one of the reasons why he didn't sign it is that a lot of people that he went to, like little advisors, are actually from caste dominant backgrounds, and a lot of them describe the bill as being Hindu-phobic, as being problematic, and basically like governor, like he doesn't know shit about Indian politics and casteism, so he just kind of basically vetoed it. So it was scrapped. But a lot of the work that me and my family have done is around political organizing, and so that's kind of what's been most of my like life when we talk about like anti-casteism is a lot of it's honestly been pretty violent. I have been doxxed for speaking out. Like I work at a university and like people were sending emails to my dean to get me fired because apparently I'm being Hindophobic by talking about anti-casteism. And so, it's been pretty traumatic, honestly. A lot of vitriol, especially online, death threats, things like that, all for just saying that, hey, like caste is kind of a problem. A lot of people could gaslight me and have said, like, you're just crying about something that doesn't exist anymore. This was like a long time ago back in India, but it's like, no, hey, it still came here. And so a lot of the organizing that I did felt very traumatic to like my nervous system as someone who's a survivor of intergenerational like violence and trauma. I kind of burnt out. Like it's exhausting to constantly talk about these traumatic issues and then be the face of it and then get so much like gaslighting and all of these things. And so it made me think about like, okay, what is actually good for my nervous system? Like, why am I doing all this work that, so many people do thank me and they're like, oh my God, like, you do so much work. And I'm like, why am I doing so much work? Like, what can I do that's like beyond this like very violent, like, way of like talking about caste? Like, who are Dalit people beyond our traumas, beyond this trauma lens? Like, I'm tired of trauma dumping. And so those kind of questions basically like resulted in me like kind of distancing myself from more of the political organizing. It's still there, and anything I do is political, right? But it kind of made me think about other ways that are more filling my cup. And also just like craving more spaces that were not just like safe spaces for Dalit people, but also safe spaces for queer and trans people. Oftentimes, when I was in Dalit spaces, I didn't always feel safe or included because of my queer identity and being non-binary. But then when I was in like South Asian queer trans spaces, all I felt was like I'm the token Dalit queer person, and like everyone else was like pretty much Brahmin. And so I also did not feel good or safe there. So I found myself craving like, where are these Dalit queer safe spaces? And so that really is what led to kind of the creation of Dalit Dreamlands, I would say. So sorry, this slide is a little messy. But basically, as I was trying to like think of like, what do I want my future to look like in organizing? There's an org called AWA, it's Asian American Women and Non-Binary Artists Association. Someone sent me a fellowship that they were doing where you had to apply for this like grant. Basically, they'll give you like $5,000 to do your own art exhibition. And so I applied and I was able to get that. And something interesting about it is that AWA was run mostly by like East Asian folks. And it also just kind of like made me think like, do South Asian orgs do stuff like this? Like I understand that many like South Asian orgs like will like have you do like a presentation or be on a panel, but like do they provide things outside of that? Like I'm tired of talking about my traumas. Like what are you going to do to help me like build something that's enjoyable, that's fun? And I've yet to see that from a South Asian organization. But anyways, shout out to AWA. I was able to do this fellowship with them, and that's really what allowed me to create Dalit Dreamlands. As someone who has a lot of Leo in my chart, doing an exhibition wasn't enough. So I also had like a dance party as well that came with it. And so through mentorship with AWA, because most of them were artists and curators, I was able to learn like how to actually create an art exhibition, how to, I learned so many things that I didn't know. I have more of a science background. And so this was really allowing me to like be more creative in a way that felt healing and not exhausting. And it did allow me to like basically tell my story in a way that was empowering instead of like trauma dumping. So yeah, and then also it kind of allowed me to still call out folks, but in a way of like, what do we mean by saying we're brown? Especially like South Asian people love saying brown, and it's like it's also a way to like invisibilize caste, because like yeah, we might all be brown, but like caste plays a huge role in our identities. And so this putting on Dalit Dreamlands was also like a gentle call in, especially to the South Asian diaspora that I was surrounded with. Oh, and then I do have like random art pieces throughout the PowerPoint. All of these artists were part of Dalit Dreamlands, and most of their Instagrams are like under their art. But these were two pieces that were on display. The left was an original painting by Nazrina. She's Indo-Caribbean, queer, very talented. Everyone honestly was very talented. And then this is a painting of Dr. Ambedkar as well. So I really recommend y'all follow all these Instagram handles because these Dalit artists are really cool. And then this title, I just thought it was so clever. I just said basically like why art needs anti-casteism, moving past like chai poetry. Like if I like read one more poem about mangoes and cha and but anyways, this is kind of like, as we know, like art is such a mirror of like societal beliefs. And like if we think about like especially South Asian art, who do we think about? Like I want you to ask yourself, like when you think of like your three top artists that you know who are South Asian, who do you think of? Does anyone want to say any names? And if you're like very, familiar with anti-caste artists, just shh. But but like really though, anyone, like do you have someone in mind who you think of like, oh, this person's like a South Asian Indian artist? Sorry, say that again? Yeah, Zach Hussain, or like Rupi Kaur. Like basically what I'm trying to say is that a lot of folks who have like a lot of like notoriety basically tend to be like from caste privileged backgrounds, especially in India. Like most art is like from Brahmin artists or caste privileged artists, and so art is also an avenue where it's heavily like influenced by caste privileged South Asian folks, and so I kind of wanted to ask, like, what does it mean for Dalit art to exist? And also, like, what do we think of when we think of Dalit art? I feel like most people think of like anti-caste political art, which is really important and also very powerful. But I also wanted it to be beyond that. Like, what is Dalit art? Like, do you just expect us to do different drawings of Dr. Ambedkar and that's Dalit art? I feel like that was also very interesting. That I feel like a lot of people, like when they're hiring a Dalit artist, they want them to like draw things in a certain way that shows that they're Dalit. And like that's also problematic. And so I wanted to be careful about that when selecting which artists we put in our show. I wanted art that was like beyond, like the political stereotypical thing that folks think of when they think of Dalit art. And so this basically is like what we released, the curatorial statement of when the event actually happened. And, we had a lot of artists. I don't know if I would be able to do this many artists again. It's a lot of work. Originally, I wanted Dalit Dreamlands to only include like Dalit artists from the diaspora, but I couldn't find that many, honestly. A lot of folks either are not out about their caste or they don't really want to be a part of it. A lot of folks like hide their caste because of the stigma. And so it was really hard for me to find like local Dalit artists. And so I was encouraged to do more of an international call out, which was important because it also provided a lot of caste oppressed artists in India to also have access to something that normally they don't have access to this, to be able to say that your art was in an exhibition in United States of America, like it does help them, right? It helps their career. It gives them opportunities that they might not otherwise have. And so I realized that it was important to also include artists who don't have access to this, because just like breaking that barrier. And so that was something that also needed a lot of care, which I'll talk more about later. But yeah, this is just some of like the stuff that went into like publicizing the event, kind of giving more background information about what the event was, why it happened. It was an art exhibition that had an opening on April 6th. I don't know if y'all are aware, April is Adult History Month. And so that's why we chose April. And then the art stayed, we had 2 galleries. The art stayed there basically up until May. And so that's kind of what the birth of Dalit Dreamlands. I really feel like I birthed it. And so one of the main parts, like when you walk right into the gallery space, this was a family project that I worked on with Simra Farouk, who's a phenomenal photographer. But basically, this is my family. It's me, my mom, my sister, and my grandma, who's from my mom's side, and then both my grandpas. So one from my mom's side and one from my dad's side. And basically, the point of this was for like basically it was a bonding experience first of all for me with my family. Unfortunately, a lot of the times that we all come together, it's from a place of like grief, like, or trauma, you know. And I wanted to kind of like come together in a way that was very celebratory and empowering. And I wanted my family to be able to see themselves on the wall in a way that felt powerful and not shameful. Like it wasn't just like my family's on the wall, but it was like my family's on the wall as like a powerful Dalit family. And something about that was so healing, very emotional, very powerful. And I think it just felt also very vulnerable, and but in a way that didn't feel like trauma, but like dumping. It felt more like, just being able to see my mom. Like a lot of times Dalit women are made to feel ugly, or like, there's a lot of shame. And so to be able to see her look at herself as art quite literally on the wall, it was a very healing experience for me. But that's like kind of the first thing that folks saw when they went into the gallery space. And then the rest of the walls, included art from other folks. You go to the next slide. And so these are just some pictures of what some of the other walls look like. Someone wrote a poem called Untouchable, and like it's their experience because Dalit folks were previously known as the Untouchables. And then also this shirt, it says "Do Not Touch." This is created by one of the artists at Dalit Dreamlands. His name is Jesse Sobal. And so basically being like formerly known as Untouchables, he kind of did like a word on play of that, and he has this line called "Do Not Touch." And so we were able to sell some of these shirts. And so if you want to get one of these shirts, definitely follow him on Instagram. He has a lot of amazing art and also just like clothing and things like that. But yeah, so a lot of this art, you can also, if you follow Dalit Dreamlands on Instagram, you can see all the specific pieces, what they mean, who the artists are, what the story is behind them. But I just wanted to show some pictures and images of the event itself. And then, of course, dancing. And so another part of like dancing and music is like, I don't know how many of y'all have been to like Bollywood themed like dance parties, or the club plays Bollywood music, or like if you go to like even weddings or something, a lot of that music is castes, especially as a Punjabi person who loves dancing, Punjabi songs and bhangra and stuff. That stuff is covered with like caste pride and like casteism. And so to be able to have a party like this and specifically hired Dalit DJs who played music that did not use caste, there's something really powerful about that, because usually when I do go to like uh, Indian Punjabi themed like parties, I'm always like, okay, they're gonna play casteist music. I'm like dancing, and then literally they'll just randomly throw in caste pride of like a very caste dominant group, and it makes it really hard to like actually even enjoy dancing and being around other South Asians. And so this was, being able to see everyone come together in like a very anti-caste space, but also still be like having the time of their life. It kind of made it real to me that we can create these spaces, we can build them, and they can be super fun, and they don't have to be super serious, and like all about like trauma. And so this is also just kind of like some of the other ways to show up as being anti-caste. I mean, it's great that folks are adding like anti-caste in their Instagram bios and are starting to acknowledge their own privilege, even disclosing like if they're Brahmin and things. And that's like, I do think that that's a good step, but like if you can't back that up with actions, then that's kind of very performative. And so a lot of the ways that folks who do come from caste privilege and want to be anti-caste just ask like to redistribute your wealth. Dalit Dreamlands was only possible because of the fellowship I received. And on top of that, I had to raise even more money to do like the dance party and have it be extra. And so a lot of that fundraising, it was a lot of labor, and a lot of it, came from like doing a GoFundMe, or selling certain art pieces and things. But honestly, like there are folks who have the wealth to quite literally fund an entire exhibition easily. And so that's also what I ask of folks who, want to be more in community of like sponsor anti-caste events and things. I ask you to distribute your wealth, like sponsor these events. I want to do another Dreamlands, give me your money, like I would love it. But also, just a reminder, just like with anti-racism and all these other things, like it's a lifelong process. And it's, it's constantly learning and also unlearning. Like I even catch myself like unlearning internalized beliefs around casteism. And so it's just a lifelong process, and it's not meant to be super fun, like especially initially when you start realizing that most of the things you've learned were lies. It's uncomfortable, and it definitely can create grief and can create confusion. And I just want to remind folks that that's a very normal process of like unlearning and letting go of like ignorance, right? Yeah, and just kind of just asking folks to be upfront about their privileges, but also like, you know, instead of like talking over folks, just like give them the space to be able to tell their stories without criticizing or dictating what it should look like. And so, yeah, that's basically what the next steps are for me, and anyone who's interested in being a part of Dalit Dreamlands. Is like, what's next? This was the first time it happened. This was in so-called Oakland, California, in the Bay Area. And so a lot of folks were not able to attend because they're not located there. And so some folks in the East Coast have asked, like, can you bring it here, or maybe even in the South? I think really like that's the goal, is to like, it doesn't have to be called the Dreamlands, but the goal is to like hopefully inspire other folks to create something like the Dreamlands, or to sponsor the Dreamlands and like bring it, like why can't we have fun and also be like super about anti-caste? And so that's kind of where I envision seeing this. It does say learning from our mistakes. So, Dalit Dreamlands wasn't perfect. We made a lot of mistakes. For example, like I realized that if you're going to work with especially Dalit artists in India, you have to do it with a lot of care and a lot of research, which, is my first time creating something. And the folks that I was getting mentorship from also never did like an international event, especially with India. But some of the mistakes we made were that we didn't know just how corrupt India customs is. And so some of the art, honestly, we had to fight to get art back, because once we shipped it back to the artists, India Customs did not want to let it go. They wanted us to pay like $20,000 to like take the art and give it to the right owner. And a lot of that we also couldn't help but feel like it was discrimination as well. I know India Customs is horrible to everyone, but the fact that we specifically said it was Dalit art, I feel like India Customs has its own little casteism going on. But at the same time, like, learning like the politics of India and learning how to work with artists in India so that you're taking care of them and you're taking care of their art, it's super important. And it is something that moving forward, I want to do more research on, and is kind of also like letting people know, because I wish that I knew that, because right now we're still dealing with some of the art. We were able to get back some of the art. This was one of them. This is a painting by Malvika Raj. Her art is amazing, so I strongly encourage you all to follow her. But this is also a painting. It's huge. It's magnificent. It is on sale. We prefer to try to sell it. It's here, and we prefer to sell it instead of trying to deal with India Customs again. Right now, like, it's going for $7,000, but the amount is flexible. And so if any of y'all know even like a South Asian org here, or like anyone who could, sponsor purchasing it. It would be amazing to have this even like in a university hall or like in a museum or in a library where it can have its own like residential space. That would be amazing. So my email address is there if anyone has any leads or is interested or anything like that. And then these are also some pieces. These are clothing items that were also created by Malvika. And so that we have like blouses, we have saris, we have skirts. It's so beautiful. Like in these pictures, you can't even see the designs, but all the designs, like they're hand painted. And so there's been a lot of care and talent put into these. And so a lot of this art we finally had to fight back to get from India Customs. And so they are in our possession. And so we're also selling these as well. So if you like any of these, or if you want to look at more, we have a catalog. One of the ways that you can support a lot of these artists is to purchase their art. And so if you're interested in any of this or you want to see a catalog, you can email me as well. And then, yeah, this is also another artist. His name is RV. He's all the way to the right. He has a clothing line. It's beautiful. It's phenomenal. And he created these shirts that basically have like various Dalit leaders. There's one with Dr. Ambedkar. We have one with Buddha, Savitribai, and you can purchase these as well. A lot of them, we have different sizes. Some of them you can pair them as part of like an Indian outfit. You can also wear them with jeans or skirts. We're also selling those as well. Yeah, I believe that will be the end. We also had a really awesome dance group perform at the Dalit Dreamlands dance party. And it was just really beautiful. And honestly, like, I feel like this is like proof that these spaces can exist. We created them and we just have to continue to invest in them. So yeah, a new world is possible. It's already happening. Thank you. If you have questions, let me know.
I was wondering, like, how early on, like, you started. Oh, I know that you started with your parents and your family working on like this like political kind of like disruption and work for anti-caste. So I wonder how young were you when you kind of started even paying more of a critical attention to it?
That's such a great question. So growing up, like I always felt like our family was different, but I didn't understand it because my parents moved to so-called Fremont, which is like it's in the Bay Area. It's like heavily populated by a lot of people who identify as Indian. And when we would like go to events and stuff, like I never understood why all these other Indian families had so much wealth. And I was like, dang, like what are they doing that we're not, things like that. And then also just seeing like how much family other like Indian families we knew like had, like how much support they had, and like they had cousins, they had reunions. Like for me, even now, the only people that are here is like my intermediate family, and then they were able to sponsor their parents, so my grandparents. But I don't have like none of my like parents' brothers or sisters are here. I don't have cousins. I've had like one or two cousins who were able to come here on a student visa, but I don't have family outside of that here. They're all in India. I was basically born in the village in India, and villages are also separated based on caste as well. And so, my dad especially grew up in a lot of poverty. And so he also had a lot of trauma. And I started finding out more about caste when I started my own healing, and not just with therapy, but also asking these questions like, why does my family have so much trauma compared to like other Indian families? And not to like say they don't, but they were definitely hiding it at least better. And so I just started asking a lot of questions to my family, like, why is this happening? Why is that happening? And anytime they did talk about caste, they would like whisper it. Like that's how much trauma they had about caste. Like it was something that don't talk about it here, don't tell anyone. A lot of it was like silence, and even when they would say the caste we come from, which is Chamar, they would literally whisper it. And then if I would try to say it, they would like want me to not say it. Like that's how much of a stigma and how much fear they lived in, that someone will find out what our real caste is. And so things like that I started connecting the dots, of like, why is everything like this? And then I started talking about these experiences like online, and that's when I was able to find like a community of other folks who also were already having these conversations, and I was able to find mentors and these social circles where they were talking about it and they were connecting the dots, and that kind of like fueled my own like passion around this. Like, it felt very validated that like a lot of the access that my family did not have, a lot of it was due to casteism. So yeah, that's kind of this little short story of it. Yeah, thanks.
I have another question to you.
Yeah.
I was curious. So with the whole like corruption of the customs, I'm wondering like how what is their excuse? What I don't know how flat out they're going to say this is because of caste, or
Yeah.
they're trying to hide it and they try to be indirect about it and it just permeates socially. So what do they even say to you to try
Yeah.
to like, block these artists from getting their artwork back?
So a lot of people like deal with it, so it's not like always based on caste, but basically the way that they try to get money out of you is they put these taxes. They're like, you have to put like how much of the prices of something, and for insurance purposes, the org had to put like the actual value, and like I said, that painting was like $7,000. And so based on the amount, they wanted to charge taxes in order to even to have the artists pick up their art when they're there. And these taxes added up to like even more than what the cost of the art is. And so when we were emailing back and forth, this was through DHL, which fuck DHL. But like, as we started explaining the situation, like, hey, this was part of an art exhibition, adult art exhibition, like these are artists who already don't have access to these spaces, like we're not able to cover these costs, like can we please just have the art sent to them? And we even raised, like, they were like, oh, pay us 1,000. We're like, we don't have that. And they're like, pay us 600. So we raised the 600, and all in the end, they didn't even give the art to the artist, they sent it back to us. So we raised all this money, had like emails on emails and emails and phone calls advocating for the artists to get their art back, all for the art to just come back to us. And so I feel like they're never going to flat out say, like that they're corrupt and that they don't care if it's adult art. In fact, they probably want it more. But a lot of them were like, well, this art is going to be destroyed if you don't give us the money to pick it up, because we can't just keep it here. And so a lot of it was like just a lot of corruption that I had the privilege of not knowing about. And also just, that was something I wish I had researched more, because I had no idea that that's even a process, but it is. And so that's something that we're still navigating right now. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the question. Thanks for an excellent presentation.
Thanks.
I loved hearing you. I see people in cafes, and in one of the images of your exhibition that you shared, also
Yeah.
there were Palestine flags. I want to ask this question specifically because, again, like Indian diaspora here is like so low to just inspire whiteness and not really, think about situating as to like where we are and what does anti-casteism mean in relation to other global oppression. Right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, like how do you for yourself understand that why is it necessary to be in solidarity
Yeah.
with what's happening, specifically via the US, the imperial core?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. That's a great point. I think like a way to look at it is like, all of these like solidarities are necessary. We can't say like we're like pro Black Lives Matter, but then we don't care about Palestine. And then also you might see a lot of South Asians are speaking up about Palestine. They are speaking up about all these issues that, as long as they don't have anything to do with it. Like, how many of them are talking about Kashmir? Like, how many of them are talking about casteism? And so it's a great point of like, I also made it a huge point that we needed to talk about Palestine even within this Dalit exhibition, because like these like struggles are related, right? Like all of these solidarities are necessary. And so we were able to kind of create like art to also show like, hey, we're having this art in this safe space, but also what is happening outside of this space, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Kashmir. And I think it's so important to like bring up those issues as well and talk about them. And like also we can't pick and choose what we care about or who we fight for. And so these solidarities I think are the only way that we can even like create like freedom and things like that. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Manu. Amazing presentation. So I want to ask, like you mentioned, you sort of got burned out from political advocacy and you shift towards art. So, like, can you tell like what made you land on art specifically, and like what the experience was like? Because I'm sure like it may have felt like you're like leaving something behind, or you're like sort of betraying some effort that you previously
Yeah.
made. How did you make sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of it was burnout. I experienced something really traumatic in 2022 that I honestly didn't see myself coming back from. It was a really, really hard time. And I had no capacity to even go to like a protest or show up to another meeting about like policy, or even honestly talk about anything online. I was like in a really difficult mindset and I literally needed something to like keep me going. I needed something to look forward to. And you know, I would argue that Dalit Dreamlands is also very political, and it's just political in like a different way, in a way where I felt more like I'm actually centering my own healing and my own joy. And there were parts of it that felt selfish because I'm like, okay, but then like so and so needs this, and like this community needs that. And so I basically had to do a lot of work to like tell myself that I'm not abandoning anything. I'm actually expanding. That like even though that work will always be there and I will always come back to it because that's just like part of my life. And like how can I transform it into something that doesn't drain me and doesn't drain also other like Dalit leaders and activists. You know, I wanted to also be like, what can I create that centers our healing and like gives us kind of like a space to like, okay, like I don't have to have like watch my back every second that I'm going to be attacked or something, and I can just like let go here and like come here as like it's more like restorative and not like breaking us down. So yeah, you know, a part of that was kind of allowing myself to take that space so that I could expand and build. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
In South Asia, and there are close to half a billion people in South Asia who live outside of India. I myself am from Pakistan originally, and most of this is like, just like to me, it's like alien. I mean, it's like it wasn't at all part of our experience. But just listening to you now, I kind of thought about when I was growing up, like the people who do the cleaning, they tended to be Christian converts.
Mm-hmm.
More likely than not came from other background. Yeah, that was taken for granted, and that's still the case.
Yeah. No, it's
But nonetheless, I think perhaps, yeah, like I mean, I don't think that, yeah, I mean, the situations are, different in India, at least some parts of India versus, countries, large countries in that region, which, I mean, class exists,
mhm.
according to Marx, it is the, it is the universal condition, but caste in that form is like, yeah, something which is very different in other countries in that region.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it shows up everywhere, even outside of India, you know, like India is like the epicenter, but like there are Pakistani Dalits and is a lot of casteism even in Pakistan, even in like within Muslim communities. There are a lot of caste oppressed folks who, you know, I forgot the term, it's not coming to me, but a lot of them are also silenced because they're like, well, Islam does not have caste. Like, that's like a Hindu thing, but it infiltrated Islam, it infiltrated Sikhi, and so it does exist outside of India. It looks different though. I feel like in India it's very overt and it's just like in your face, but when you like deconstruct it and you look at how it shows up in other areas of the world, you know, Dr. Ambedkar really highlighted how anywhere that like basically caste dominant people go, caste is going to follow them and it's going to show up. They're still going to practice these casteist beliefs in other places. Just because they're not in India doesn't mean they're not going to still have that kind of mindset. And so, yeah, it's very eye opening and it's really complex too. It's really interesting how it shows up differently. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I was thinking about Dalit dreamland. So when we are referencing to dream, we are referencing to the time, right? And I was thinking about Dalit past, the past of the caste, which is very traumatic, like you have been talking about. And then one of the very renowned theorist, Gopal Guru, says that past is not made for Dalits; it informs the present.
Mm-hmm.
And you're imagining the future through an artistic expression, right? So I was thinking about how do you engage with this traumatic past in your articulation of the future, and especially when for making the spaces visible for Dalit artists or non-caste artists is fine because past is very problematic even when it comes to US, like the foundation of US itself, and nobody wants to deal with the past. It's very, especially when it's discomforting.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you problematize or engage with the past in imagining the future, the dream itself? And then when we say Dalit dreamland, how that category of Dalit signifies the universal hope for everyone, regardless. Because then, when I think about like privileged caste person, they would say that this is just a Dalit dreamland, right? Where do I identify myself? Where do I identify, relate with this? This is sort of a question, and then often it's like the guilt that is produced. So how do you, approach this? This is perhaps I may not be clear, but these are just random thoughts that is coming to my mind.
Yeah. Well, it's a good point. Like, right. Talk about anti-caste futurisms, but also like a lot of that involves the past. It involves the traumas, right? For me personally, like the way that I've dealt with that is like, well, I have a lot of privilege. I do want to say, like, I've been able to get an education here. I have citizenship here, and so that allows me to have a lot of other privileges compared to like, Dalit folks who are in India. Like, I do have a lot of privilege. I can like, access certain things. So I actually even was able to have a Dalit therapist here, and she understood my trauma in a way that I've never been able to really like have from any other therapist or even like anyone outside of that. And I think she really was the one asking me these questions, like our traumas don't define us, and like that helped me to like not necessarily feel like a victim or feel like chained to my trauma and defined by it, especially when it comes to caste. It was more like reimagining it. Like, just because that's the past does not mean that it has to be a cycle that continues. A lot of it is through like intergenerational healing as well. But when you're asking me this question, I was thinking about this photography piece that we had at Dalit Dreamlands. I don't know if folks are familiar with Rahi. He's like a really amazing artist based in India, but he had some art that he submitted. And the art pieces were basically, it was like pictures of like what you would say is a family like on the beach. Basically, it's like giving summer vacation, but like their faces are like basically like crossed out, and like there's like a lot of, there's like something very like sad, like when you look at pictures of summer vacation, you look at kids having fun, everyone's smiling, it's like really nice, and there's like a gloomy kind of mood to it. And the way that he describes it is that this was a vacation my family never had the privilege to even have. And so he was talking about the past, but he was able to reimagine it through this art, right? He was able to like look at that and say, this is what it could have looked like. And just because it didn't doesn't mean that it can't. And so he was able to like transform this like deep pain that he had of like seeing like how hard his family had to work to even survive, that a vacation was not ever like anything even possible for them, especially growing up. And so he was able to depict it in a way that felt like, yeah, it was gloomy and it was sad and it was heartbreaking, but it was also so like hopeful and so creatively thought out and like very kind of like futuristic, right? And this is him working on this in the present. And it just felt like all these time points were like connecting with each other and it felt very healing. And I think that's really what it's about, is like centering our own healing in a way that gives us more hope for where we're going. So yeah, I hope that kind of touched upon it. But like when you're explaining and talking about it, I literally thought about that piece and like how it was just really empowering. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
As a university student, I was wondering in what ways has academia either aided or harmed your goals as both an artist and an activist?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, academia is such a double-edged sword. Um, it really depends. So, like, I feel like there's this, I don't want to call it a fad, but it just seems like caste has been like this hot topic lately where everyone wants to be anti-caste and everyone wants to write their, like, especially caste privileged people want to do their thesis on like talking about anti-casteism and things like that. And that's great, but also like, a lot of like professors, even like who work in different institutions, especially universities, a lot of them have been very against it. A lot of them actually feel very threatened by it because they come from caste privilege and they automatically worry that it's going to take away their privileges. It's going to take away their kids' privileges as well as students. A lot of them feel very uncomfortable wanting to bring caste into academia because I think it would also force them to sit with like, their own internal like basically forms of like discrimination. I think that a lot of times caste privilege folks with that kind of power like will hide behind like we're people of color, and like we're brown and things like that. And I feel like there's been a lot of basically a lot of the like protests against introducing caste on campus has been from South Asian professors. And I think they see it as a threat. And so it is important to have folks like professors who are like tenured or even deans who are willing to do the work to really learn about this and why it's such a big issue and why they should invest in it. And, like something that I've talked about with other like Dalit academics is like, like we have like LGBT center, we have like a women's resource center. And so a lot of us have been imagining having like a Dalit student center. When I was doxxed, not only was like my job in jeopardy, I actually had to basically have an interrogation with human resources, and all of those folks were white and they were just like, brown people against brown people, what is happening here? And so I had to do like the labor of like not only defending myself and explaining what the situation was, I had to teach them about what caste is. I had to teach them about like how is it showing up in this experience, and that I'm being attacked because of casteism and not because I'm like being the problematic one. That was a lot of trauma, honestly, to have to do that labor on top of defending myself. And the whole time I was just thinking, like, what if there was a Dalit student center here? What if I had someone who could represent me, who could explain it in a way that I didn't have to do that, And so I think for academia to truly embody like anti-casteism, there needs to be more support and encouragement that like has Dalit students back and like encourages them to talk about these things without having repercussions. Yeah.
If that's all of our questions,
Oh, I
we're.
have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. You said that the religious holiday Holi celebrates the death of a caste oppressed woman, and celebrations are often like permeated with sexual violence. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that and like what Dalit feminism specifically means to you, like how this category of woman is articulated, and how caste and womanhood might intersect.
Yeah, for sure. I think like honestly, a lot of casteism has to do with violence against Dalit women. Um, like, you know, as we know, like rape is a form of like power, it's a form of control. And honestly, even in my own family, a lot of my family, like a lot of Dalit women, like have been even threatened with rape from like caste privileged men because they see it like it's like the worst, like the insult that you could have on like a family's reputation and things like that. But like sexual violence is a huge way that casteism is like alive, basically. And so there's been like even like, you know, these like huge, like horrible, terrible cases of like rape that basically have gone viral that took place in India. They were done against a Dalit woman, and the fact that she was Dalit was a really big part of it. And so, you know, this festival, Holi, it's literally the epitome of like celebrating the death of a Dalit woman. And so, a lot of times when it's celebrated, like people are like, you know, doing drugs, which doesn't excuse anything, but like a lot of them are encouraged to do drugs and then go sexually harass women and like force them to do things because it's almost like this holiday is feeding that kind of like energy, to the point where, especially in India, a lot of women don't even go out during Holi because they don't feel safe. It's like almost like it's known as being like you're going to be harassed and you either just accept it and put up with it or you don't go outside. And so it's just like knowing that knowledge and then seeing everyone wearing white running to like wherever the event is to go celebrate Holi. It's like it's just very ironic and heartbreaking. But yeah, thanks.
If that's all of our questions, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. We here at the Indigo Collective engage in artistic, community-based, and research projects with an understood history of indigo as a cash crop that's been used historically to extract value from the global south. And I believe in this capacity, we are unique as a UT Austin group. I believe that no one else on campus really does the work that we understand, or the work that we do, or engaged in an academic history that we do. So briefly, we're going to flash up a QR code that's a link to our funding. As Manu said, distribution of wealth is always very important. So we encourage you to engage in communities that you believe in. If not here, then somewhere else. That's pivotal to engaging in any academic or activist groups. So thank you. I'd also like to plug that we're doing the speaker series for 7 more weeks. If you like the stuff that you see here, we very much encourage you to talk to your friends, talk to your family, and we encourage more people to show up for groups like this. It's very important to engage in these types of communities. Thank you.
Thanks.